Chapter 7. I chopped those onions with my own ex-godly hands. You'd better eat them. Being productive. Ugh, it's such a human concept. It implies you have limited time, lol, and have to work hard to make something happen, double lol. I mean, perhaps if you were labouring away for years writing an opera about the glories of Apollo, I could understand the appeal of being productive. But how can you get a sense of satisfaction and serenity from preparing food? That I did not understand. Even at Camp Half-Blood, I wasn't asked to make my own meals. True, the hot dogs were questionable, and I never found out what sort of bugs were in bug juice, but at least I'd be served by a cadre of beautiful nymphs. Now I was compelled to wash lettuce, dice tomatoes, and chop onions. Where does this food come from? I asked, blinking tears from my eyes. I'm no Demeter, but even I could tell this produce was fresh from the earth, probably because of the amount of dirt I had to wash off. The thought of Demeter made me think of Meg, which might have caused me to weep even if I hadn't already been afflicted by onion fumes. Calypso dumped a basket of muddy carrots in front of me. Emmy's got a garden on the roof, greenhouses, year-round growing. You should see the herbs, basil, thyme, rosemary. It's amazing. Emmy smiled. Thank you, dear. You definitely know your gardening. I sighed. Now those two were bonding. Soon I would be stuck between Emmy and Calypso discussing kale-growing techniques and Leo and Josephine waxing poetic about carburetors. I wouldn't win. Speak of the demon. Leo burst through the door next to the pantry, holding aloft a wheel of cheese like a victor's laurel crown. Behold the cheddar, he announced. All hail the cheese conquerors. Josephine, chuckling good-naturedly, lumbered in behind him with a metal pail. The cows seemed to like Leo. Hey, abuelita, Leo said. All the cows love Leo. He grinned at me. And these cows are red, man, like bright red. That definitely made me want to weep. Red cows were my favourite. For centuries I had a herd of sacred scarlet cattle, before cow collecting went out of fashion. Josephine must have seen the miserable look on my face. We just use their milk, she said hastily. We don't butcher them. I should hope not, I cried. Killing red cattle would be sacrilege. Josephine didn't look properly terrified by the idea. Yeah, but mostly it's because Emmy made me give up meat 20 years ago. It's much better for you, Emmy chided. You're not immortal anymore. You need to take care of yourself. But cheeseburgers, Joe muttered. Leo plunked the cheese wheel in front of me. Cut me a wedge of this, my good man. Chop, chop. I scowled at him. Don't test me, Valdez. When I am a god again, I will make a constellation out of you. I will call it the Small Exploding Latino. I like it. He patted my shoulder, causing my knife to jiggle. Did no one fear the wrath of the gods anymore? While Emmy baked loaves of bread, which I must admit smelled incredible, I tossed a salad with carrots, cucumbers, mushrooms, tomatoes, and all manner of roof-grown plant material. Calypso used fresh lemons and cane sugar to make lemonade, while humming tracks from Beyoncé's album of the same name. During our travels west, I had taken it upon myself to catch Calypso up on the last 3 millennia of popular music. Leo cut the cheese. You can interpret that any way you want. The cheddar wheel turned out to be a bright red, all the way through and quite tasty. Josephine made dessert, which she said was her speciality. Today this meant fresh berries and homemade sponge cake in sweet red cream with a meringue topping, lightly toasted with a welding torch. As for the ghost, Agamophis, he hovered in one corner of the kitchen, holding his magic 8-ball, dejectedly, as if it were a third-place prize from a 3-person competition. Finally, we sat down to lunch. I hadn't realised how hungry I was. It had been quite a while since breakfast, and Festus's in-flight meal service left much to be desired. I shovelled my food in while Leo and Calypso told our hosts about our travels west. Between bites of fresh bread with bright red butter, I added commentary as needed, since of course I had the superior storytelling skills. We explained how my ancient foe Python had retaken the original site of Delphi, cutting off access to the most powerful oracle. We explained how the Triumvirate had sabotaged all forms of communication used by demigods, iris messages, magical scrolls, ventriloquist puppets, even the arcane magic of email. With the help of Python, the 3 evil emperors now intended to control or destroy all the oracles from ancient times, thus putting the very future of the world in a stranglehold. We freed the Grove of Dodona, I summed up, but that oracle simply sent us here to secure the next source of prophecy, the cave of Trophonius. Calypso pointed to my quiver, which lay against the nearest sofa. Apollo, show them your talking arrow. Emmy's eyes gleamed with the keen interest of an archer. Talking arrow? I shuddered. The arrow I had retrieved from the whispering trees of Dodona had so far done me little good. Only I could hear its voice, and whenever I asked its advice, it spouted nonsense in Elizabethan English, which inflected my speech patterns and left me talking like a bad Shakespearean actor for hours. This amused Calypso no end. I will not show them my talking arrow, I said. I will, however, share the limerick. No, said Calypso and Leo in unison. They dropped their forks and covered their ears. I recited, There once was a god named Apollo, who plunged in a cave blue and hollow. Upon a free-seater, the bronze fire-eater, was forced death and madness to swallow. Around the table an uncomfortable silence fell. Josephine glowered. Never before has any voice dared to utter a limerick in this house, Apollo. And let us hope no one will ever do so again, I agreed. But such was the prophecy of Dodona that brought us here. Emmy's expression tightened, removing any lingering doubts that this was the same Hemithia I had immortalized so many centuries ago. I recognized the intensity in her eyes, the same determination that had sent her over a cliff, trusting her fate to the gods. A cave blue and hollow, she said. That's the oracle of Trophonius, all right. It's located in the Blue Spring Caverns, about 80 miles south of town. Leo grinned as he chewed, his mouth an avalanche of earth-toned food particles. Easiest quest ever, then. We get Festus back, then we look up this place on Google Maps and fly down there. Doubtful, Josephine said. The Emperor has the surrounding countryside heavily guarded. You couldn't fly a dragon anywhere near Blue Spring without getting shot out of the sky. Even if you could, the cave entrances are all way too small for a dragon to plunge into. Leo pouted. But the limerick? May be deceptive, I said. It is, after all, a limerick. Calypso sat forward. She had wrapped a napkin around her formerly broken hand, perhaps because it still ached, perhaps because she was nervous. It reminded me of torch wadding, not a happy association after my last encounter with the mad Emperor Nero. What about the last line, she asked. Apollo will be forced death and madness to swallow. Josephine stared at her empty plate. Emmy gave her hand a quick squeeze. The oracle of Trophonius is dangerous, Emmy said. Even when we had free access to it, before the Emperor moved in, we would only consult the spirit in extreme emergencies. She turned to me. You must remember, you were the god of prophecy. Despite the excellent lemonade, my throat felt parched. I didn't like being reminded of what I used to be. I also didn't like the gigantic holes in my memory, filled with nothing but vague dread. I remember the cave was dangerous, yes, I said. I don't recall why. You don't recall? Emmy's voice took on a dangerous edge. I normally concentrated on the godly side of things, I said. The quality of the sacrifices, what sort of incense the petitioners burned, how pleasing the hymns of praise were. I never asked what kind of trials the petitioners went through. You never asked. I didn't like Emmy echoing my words. I had a feeling she would make an even worse Greek chorus than Calypso. I did some reading at Camp Half-Blood, I said defensively. There wasn't much about Trophonius. Chiron couldn't help either. He'd completely forgotten about the oracle. Supposedly, Trophonius's prophecies were dark and scary. Sometimes they drove people insane. Perhaps his cave was a sort of haunted house, with dangling skeletons, priestesses jumping out and saying boo. Emmy's sour expression told me that my guess was off the mark. I also read something about petitioners drinking from 2 special springs. I persisted. I thought swallowing death and madness might be a symbolic reference to that. You know, poetic license. No, Josephine muttered. It's not poetic license. That cave literally drove our daughter mad. A cold draught swept across my neck, as if the way station itself had let out a forlorn sigh. I thought about the apocalypse I'd seen crayoned on the wall of the child's now abandoned bedroom. What happened? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know, especially if it might be a portent for what I would soon face. Emmy tore a piece of bread crust. She let the pieces fall. Once the Emperor came to Indianapolis, this new Hercules. Calypso started to ask a question, but Emmy raised her hand. Please, dear, don't ask me to name him. Not here, not now. As I'm sure you know, many gods and monsters hear you when you speak their names. He is worse than most. A pang of sympathy pulled at the corner of Calypso's mouth. Please, go on. At first, Emmy said, we didn't understand what was happening. Our friends and companions began to disappear. She gestured around her at the vast living area. We used to have a dozen or so living here at any given time. Now, we're all that's left. Josephine leaned back in her chair. In the light of the rose window, her hair gleamed the same steel grey as the wrenches in her overall pockets. The Emperor was looking for us. He knew about the way station. He wanted to destroy us. But like I said, this isn't an easy place to find unless we invite you in. So instead, his forces waited until our people were outside. They took our friends a few at a time. Took them? I asked. As in, alive? Oh yeah. Josephine's grim tone made it sound as if death would have been preferable. The Emperor loves prisoners. He captured our guests, our griffins. A berry slipped out of Leo's fingers. Griffins? Hazel and Frank told me about griffins. They fought some in Alaska. Said they were like rabid hyenas with wings. Josephine smirked. The small ones. The wild ones can be, yeah. But we raised the best here. At least we did. Our last mating pair disappeared about a month ago. Heloise and Abelard. We let them out to hunt. They have to do that so to stay healthy. They never returned. For Georgina, that was the final insult. A bad feeling began to nag at me. Something beyond the obvious. We're talking about creepy things that might get me killed. The griffin nests in the niches above us. A distant memory about my sister's followers. A comment Nero had made in my vision that the new Hercules was obsessed with destroying the House of Nets. As if that were another name for the way station. I felt like someone's shadow was falling over the dining table. Someone I should know. Perhaps someone I should be running away from. Calypso unwrapped the napkin from her hand. Your daughter, she asked. What happened to her? Neither Josephine nor Emmy responded. Agamephis bowed slightly, his bloody tunic glowing in various shades of nacho topping. It's obvious, I said into the silence. The girl went to the cave of Trophonius. Emmy looked past me to Agamephis, her eyes as sharp as arrow points. Georgina got it in her head that the only way to save the way station and find the captives was to consult the oracle. She'd always been drawn to the place. She didn't fear it the way most people did. One night she slipped away. Agamephis helped her. We don't know exactly how they got there. The ghost shook his magic 8-ball. He tossed it to Emmy, who frowned at the answer on the bottom. It was ordained, she read. I don't know what you mean, you dead old fool, but she was just a child, without the throne. You know, you knew what would happen to her. The throne? Calypso asked. Another memory bobbed to the surface of my 8-ball brain. Oh gods, I said. The throne. Before I could say more, the entire ball shuddered. The entire hall shuddered. Plates and cups rattled on the dining table. Agamephis vanished in a flash of nacho orange. At the top of the barreled ceiling, the green and brown stained glass panels darkened as if a cloud had blacked out the sun. Josephine rose. Way station. What's happening on the roof? As far as I could tell, the building didn't respond. No brick shot out of the wall. No doors banged open and shut in Morse code. Emmy set the magic 8-ball on the table. The rest of you, stay here. Joe and I will check it out. Calypso frowned. But that's an order, Emmy said. I'm not losing any more guests. It can't be Josephine stopped herself. It can't be him. Maybe Heloise and Abelard are back. Maybe. Emmy didn't sound convinced, but just in case. The two women moved quickly to a metal supply cabinet in the kitchen. Emmy grabbed her bow and quiver. Josephine pulled out an old-fashioned machine gun with a circular drum magazine between the two handles. Leo nearly choked on his dessert. Is that a Tommy gun? Josephine patted the weapon affectionately. This is little Bertha, a reminder of my sordid past life. I'm sure there's nothing to worry about. You all sit tight. With that comforting advice, our heavily armed hosts marched off to check the roof. Chapter 8. Lovebirds Arguing. Trouble in Elysium. I'll just scrub these plates. The order to sit tight seemed clear enough to me. Leo and Calypso, however, decided that the least we could do was to clean up the lunch dishes. See my previous comment, re the dumbness of productivity. I scrubbed, Calypso rinsed, Leo dried, which wasn't even work for him, since all he had to do was heat his hands a little. So, Calypso said, what's this throne Emmy mentioned? I scowled at my foamy stack of bread pans. The throne of memory. It's a chair carved by the goddess Mesame herself. Leo leered at me over the top of a steaming salad plate. You forgot the throne of memory. Isn't that a mortal sin or something? The only mortal sin, I said, would be failing to incinerate you as soon as I become a god again. You could try, Leo said, but then how would you learn these secret scales on the Val Designator? I accidentally sprayed myself in the face. What secret scales? Both of you stop, Calypso ordered. Apollo, why is this throne of memory important? I wiped the water off my face. Talking about the throne of memory had jogged loose a few more pieces of information from my mind, but I didn't like what I remembered. Before a petitioner went into the cave of Trophonius, I said, he or she was supposed to drink from 2 magical springs, forgetfulness and memory. Leo picked up another plate. Steam curled from the porcelain. Wouldn't the 2 springs, cancel each other out? I shook my head. Assuming the experience didn't kill you, it would prepare your mind for the oracle. You would then descend into the cave and experience untold horrors. Such as? Calypso asked. I just said they were untold. I do know that Trophonius would fill your mind with bits of nightmarish verse that, if assembled properly, became a prophecy. Once you stumbled out of the cave, assuming you lived and weren't driven permanently insane, the priests would sit you down on the throne of memory. The verses would come spilling out of your mouth. A priest would write them down, and voila, there's your prophecy. With any luck, your mind would return to normal. Leo whistled. That is one messed up oracle. I like the singing trees better. I suppressed a shudder. Leo hadn't been with me in the grove of Dodona. He didn't appreciate just how terrible those clashing voices were. But he had a point. There was a reason few people remembered the cave of Trophonius. It wasn't a place that got rave write-ups in the yearly Hot Oracles to Visit Now articles. Calypso took a bread pan from me and began to rinse it. She seemed to know what she was doing, though her hands were so lovely I couldn't imagine she often did her own dishes. I would have to ask her which moisturiser she used. What if the petitioner couldn't use the throne? She asked. Leo snickered. Use the throne? Calypso glared at him. Sorry. Leo tried to look serious, which for him was always a losing battle. If the petitioner couldn't use the throne, I said, there would be no way to extract the bits of verse from his or her mind. The petitioner would be stuck with those horrors from the cave forever. Calypso rinsed the pan. Georgina, that poor child, what do you think happened to her? I didn't want to think about that. The possibilities made my skin crawl. Somehow she must have made it into the cave. She survived the oracle. She made it back here, but not in good shape. I recalled the frowny-faced, knife-wielding stick figures on her bedroom wall. My guess is that the Emperor subsequently seized control of the throne of memory. Without that, Georgina would never be able to recover fully. Perhaps she left again and went looking for it and was captured. Leo muttered a curse in Spanish. I keep thinking about my little bro Harley back at camp. If somebody tried to hurt him. He shook his head. Who is this Emperor and how soon can we stomp him? I scrubbed the last of the pans. At least, this was one epic quest I had successfully completed. I stared at the bubbles fizzing on my hands. I have a pretty good idea who the Emperor is, I admitted. Josephine started to say his name, but Emmy is right. It's best not to speak it aloud. The new Hercules. I swallowed. In my stomach, salad and bread seemed to be holding a mud wrestling contest. He was not a nice person. In fact, if I had the right Emperor, this quest could be personally awkward. I hoped I was wrong. Perhaps I could stay at the way station and direct operations while Calypso and Leo did the actual fighting. That seemed only fair since I'd had to scrub the dishes. Leo put away the dinner plates. His eyes scanned side to side as if reading invisible equations. This project Josephine is working on, he said. She's building some kind of tracking device. I didn't ask, but she must be trying to find Georgina. Of course. Calypso's voice took on a sharper edge. Can you imagine losing your child? Leo's ears reddened. Yeah, but I was thinking, if we can get back to Festus, I could run some numbers, maybe reprogram his Archimedes sphere. Calypso threw in the towel, quite literally. It landed in the sink with a damp flop. Leo, you can't reduce everything to a program. He blinked. I'm not. You're trying to fix it, Calypso said, as if every problem is a machine. Joe and Emmy are in serious pain. Emmy told me they're thinking about abandoning the way station, giving themselves up to the Emperor, if it'll save their daughter. They don't need gadgets or jokes or fixes. Try listening. Leo held out his hands. For once, he didn't seem to know what to do with them. Look, babe, don't babe me, she snapped. Don't. Apollo. Josephine's voice boomed from the main hall. She didn't sound panicked exactly, but definitely tense, somewhat like the atmosphere in the kitchen. I stepped away from the happy couple. Calypso's outburst had taken me by surprise, but as I thought about it, I recalled half a dozen other spats between her and Leo as we had travelled west. I simply hadn't thought much about them because, well, the fights weren't about me. Also, compared to godly lovers' quarrels, Leo and Calypso's were nothing. I pointed over my shoulder. I think I'll just, I left the kitchen. In the middle of the main hall, Emmy and Josephine stood with their weapons at their sides. I couldn't quite read their expressions. Expectant, on edge, the way Zeus's cupbearer Ganymede looked whenever he gave Zeus a new wine to try. Apollo. Emmy pointed over my head, where griffin nests line the edge of the ceiling. You have a visitor. In order to see who Emmy was pointing at, I had to step forward into the rug and turn around. In retrospect, I shouldn't have done that. As soon as I placed my foot on the rug, I thought, wait, was this rug here before? Which was followed closely by the thought, why does this rug look like a tightly woven net? Followed by, this is a net. Followed by, yikes. The net enmeshed me and rocketed me into the air. I regained the power of flight. For a microsecond I imagined I was being recalled to Olympus, ascending in glory to sit at the right hand of my father. Well, 3 thrones down on Zeus's right, anyway. Then gravity took hold. I bounced like a yo-yo. One moment I was eye level with Leo and Calypso, who were gaping at me from the kitchen entrance. The next moment I was even with the griffins' nests, staring into the face of a goddess I knew all too well. You're probably thinking, it was Artemis. This net trap was just a little sibling prank. Surely no loving sister would let her brother suffer so much for so long. She has finally come to rescue our hero Apollo. No, it was not Artemis. The young woman sat on the moulding ledge, playfully swinging her legs. I recognised her elaborately laced sandals, her dress made from layers of mesh in forest-coloured camouflage. Her braided auburn hair made a ponytail so long it wrapped around her neck like a scarf or a noose. Her fierce dark eyes reminded me of a panther watching its prey from the shadows of the underbrush. A panther with a twisted sense of humour. A goddess, yes, but not the one I had hoped for. You, I snarled. It was difficult to sound menacing while bobbing up and down in a net. Hello, Apollo. Britomartis, the goddess of nets, smiled coyly. I hear you're human now. This is going to be fun. Chapter 9. Of course it's a trap. With her it always is one. Trappy McTrapface. Britomartis jumped from the ledge and landed in a kneeling position, her skirt spread around her in a pool of netting. She loves those dramatic entrances. She is such an anime character wannabe. The goddess rose. She pulled out her hunting knife. Apollo, if you value your anatomy, hold still. I had no time to protest that I couldn't exactly hold still while suspended in a swaying net. She slashed her knife across my groin. The net broke and spilled me to the floor, thankfully with my anatomy intact. My landing was not graceful. Fortunately, Leo and Calypso rushed to my aid. They each took an arm and helped me up. I was reassured to see that despite their recent spat, they could still unite on important matters like my welfare. Leo reached into his tool belt, perhaps searching for a weapon. Instead, he produced a tin of breath mints. I doubted that would do as much good. Who is this lady? He asked me. Britomartis, I said, the lady of nets. Leo looked dubious. Does that include basketball and the internet? Just hunting and fishing nets, I said. She is one of my sister's minions. Minion? Britomartis wrinkled her nose. I am no minion. Behind us, Josephine coughed. Sorry, Apollo. The lady insisted on getting your attention this way. The goddess's face brightened. Well, I had to see if he would step in my trap. And he did, as usual. Hemithia, Josephine, give us the room, please. Our hosts glanced at each other, probably wondering which of them would have to clean up the bodies after Britomartis was through with us. Then they retreated through a doorway at the back of the hall. Calypso sized up the net goddess. Britomartis, eh? Never heard of you. You must be minor. Britomartis smiled thinly. Oh, but I've heard of you, Calypso. Exiled to Aegea after the Titan War, waiting for whatever man might wash up on your shores to break your heart and leave you alone again. That must have got terribly old. She turned to Leo. This is your rescuer, eh? A bit short and scruffy for a knight in shining armour. Hey, lady! Leo shook his tin of breath mints. I've blown up way more powerful goddesses than you before. And he's not my rescuer, Calypso added. Yeah, Leo frowned. Wait, I kind of was, actually. Nor is he a knight, Calypso mused, although he is short and scruffy. A puff of smoke rose from Leo's collar. Anyway, he faced Britomartis. Where'd you get off ordering Joe and Emmy around like this in your house? I grabbed his breath mints before Britomartis could transform them into nitroglycerine. Leo, I'm afraid this is her house. The goddess gave me that coquettish smile I hated so much, the one that made me feel as if hot nectar were bubbling in my stomach. Why, Apollo? You made a correct deduction. How did you manage it? Whenever I was faced with Britomartis, I made myself just a bit taller than she. Alas, now I could not change my height at will. The best I could do was push up on the balls of my feet. Nero called this place the House of Nets, I said. I should have realised the way station was your idea. Whenever my sister wanted to design some elaborate contraption, something twisted and dangerous, she always turned to you. The goddess curtsied, swirling her net skirts. You flatter me. Now come, my friends, let's sit and talk. She gestured to the nearest cluster of sofas. Leo approached the furniture cautiously. For all his faults, he was not stupid. Calypso was about to sink into an armchair when Leo caught her wrist. Hold up. From his tool belt he pulled a folding yardstick. He extended it and poked the chair's seat cushion. A bear trap snapped shut. ripping through stuffing and fabric like an upholstery sharknado. Calypso glared at Britomartis. Are you kidding? Oops, Britomartis said gleefully. Leo pointed to one of the sofas, though I could see nothing amiss. There's a tripwire along the back of those cushions too. Does that trigger a bouncing Betty? Britomartis laughed. You're good. Yes, indeed. That is a modified pressure-activated S-mine. Lady, if that went off, it would bounce 3 feet in the air, explode and kill all of us with shrapnel. Exactly, Britomartis said with delight. Leo Valdez, you'll do nicely. Leo glowered at her. He pulled some wire cutters from his belt, walked over to the sofa and deactivated the mine. I took a breath for the first time in several seconds. I think I'll sit, over here. I pointed to the opposite sofa. Is that safe? Leo grunted. Yeah, looks okay. Once we were all comfortably settled in, with no one mangled or killed, Britomartis lounged across the formerly bear-trapped armchair and smiled. Well, isn't this nice? No, the 3 of us chorused. Britomartis toyed with her braid, possibly looking for tripwires she might have forgotten about. You asked me why I sent Joe and Emmy away. I love them dearly, but I don't think they'd appreciate the quest I'm about to give you. Quest? Calypso arched her eyebrows. I'm pretty sure I'm an older divinity than you, bouncing Betty. What right do you have to give me a quest? Britomartis flashed that flirty smile. Aren't you cute? Hun, I was around when the ancient Greeks were living in caves. I started out as a Cretan goddess. When the rest of my pantheon died out, Artemis befriended me. I joined her hunters, and here I am, thousands of years later, still weaving my nets and setting my traps. Yes, I grumbled. Here you are. The goddess spread her arms. Lead weights and fishing hooks dangled from her embroidered sleeves. Dear Apollo, you really do make a darling Lester Papadopoulos. Come here. Don't tease me, I begged. I'm not. Now that you're a harmless mortal, I've decided to finally give you that kiss. I knew she was lying. I knew that her dress would entangle me and hurt me. I recognised the malicious gleam in her rust-red eyes. She had led me astray so many times over the millennia. I flirted shamelessly with all my sister's followers, but Britomartis was the only one who ever flirted back, even though she was just as much an avowed maiden as any hunter. She delighted in tormenting me, and how many times had she pranked me by offering to set me up with other people. Gah! Artemis had never been known for her sense of humour, but her sidekick Britomartis more than made up for that. She was insufferable, beautiful, but insufferable. I admit I was tempted. Weak, mortal flesh, even weaker than divine flesh. I shook my head. You're tricking me. I won't do it. She looked offended. When have I ever tricked you? Phoebes, I cried. You promised to meet me in the forest for a romantic picnic. Instead, I was trampled by a giant wild boar. That was a misunderstanding. What about the Ingrid Bergman incident? Oh, she really did want to meet you. How was I to know someone had dug a Burmese tiger pit outside her trailer? And the date with Rock Hudson? Britomartis shrugged. Well, I never actually said he was waiting for you in the middle of the minefield. I just let you assume. You have to admit, though, the 2 of you would have made a cute couple. I whimpered and pulled my curly mortal hair. Britomartis knew me too well. I was a fool for being in a cute couple. Leo looked back and forth between us as if he'd stumbled across a heated game of Greek fire toss. It was big in Byzantium. Don't ask. Rock Hudson, he said. In a minefield. Britomartis beamed. Apollo was so adorable, skipping through the daisies until he exploded. In case you've forgotten, I muttered, I am no longer immortal, so please no Burmese tiger pits. I wouldn't dream of it, said the goddess. No, this quest isn't designed to kill you. It might kill you, but it's not designed to. I just want my griffins back. Calypso frowned. Your griffins? Yes, the goddess said. They are winged lion-eagle hybrids with... I know what a griffin is, Calypso said. I know Joe and Emmy breed them here, but why are they yours? I coughed. Calypso, griffins are the goddess's sacred animals. She is their mother. Britomartis rolled her eyes. Only in a figurative sense. I don't sit on their eggs and hatch them. You convinced me to do that once, I recalled, for a kiss I never got. She laughed. Yes, I'd forgotten about that. At any rate, the local emperor had captured my babies, Heloise and Abelard. In fact, he's been capturing mythical animals from all over the Midwest to use in his diabolical games. They must be freed. Leo studied the disassembled landmine pieces in his lap. The kid, Georgina. That's why you don't want Joe and Emmy here. You're putting your griffin's safety ahead of their daughters. Britomartis shrugged. Joe and Emmy's priorities have been compromised. They would not be able to hear this, but the griffins must come first. I have my reasons. Being a goddess, my needs take precedence. Calypso sniffed with disgust. You're as greedy and territorial as your babies. I'll pretend I didn't hear that, said the goddess. I promised Artemis I would try to help you three, but don't test my patience. You'd look wonderful as a northern-crested newt. A mixture of hope and sadness welled in my chest. Artemis, my loving sister, had not abandoned me after all. Zeus may have forbidden the other Olympians from helping me, but at least Artemis had sent her lieutenant Britomartis. Of course, Britomartis's idea of help involved testing us with landmines and bear traps, but at this point I would take what I could get. And if we find these griffins, I asked, then I'll tell you how to infiltrate the Emperor's lair, Britomartis promised. Being the goddess of traps, I know all about secret entrances. I stared at her. How is that a fair trade? Because, you adorable Lester, you need to infiltrate the palace to rescue Georgina and the other prisoners. Without them, the way station is doomed, and so are your chances of stopping the triumvirate. Also, the palace is where you'll find the throne of memory. If you can't retrieve that, your trip to the cave of Trophonius will kill you. You'll never save the other oracles. You'll never get back to Mount Olympus. I turned to Leo. I'm new to this heroic quest business. Shouldn't there be a reward at the end? Not just more deadly quests? Nope, Leo said. This is pretty standard. Oh, the injustice. A minor goddess forcing me, one of the 12 Olympians, to retrieve animals for her. I silently vowed that if I ever regained my godhood, I would never again send a poor mortal on a quest, unless it was really important, and unless I was sure the mortal could handle it, and unless I was pressed for time, or I just really didn't feel like doing it myself. I would be much kinder and more generous than this net goddess was being to me. What would you have us do? I asked Britomartis. Wouldn't these griffins be held at the Emperor's palace? Couldn't we do some one-stop shopping? Oh no, Britomartis said. The really important animals, the rare and valuable ones. The Emperor keeps those in a special facility with the proper resources to care for them. The Indianapolis Zoo. I shuddered. I find zoos to be depressing places, full of sad caged animals, screaming children and bad food. The griffins will be well guarded, I guessed. Absolutely. Britomartis sounded a bit too excited about the prospect. So please try to release the griffins before you get injured or killed. Also, you must hurry. Here comes the time limit. Leo looked at me knowingly. There's always a time limit. In 3 days, Britomartis continued, the Emperor plans to use all the animals and prisoners in one massive celebration. A naming ceremony, I recalled. Nanette, the bleme, who almost killed us, she mentioned something about that. Indeed, Britomartis grimaced. This Emperor, he loves naming things after himself. At the ceremony, he plans to rechristen Indianapolis. That in itself did not strike me as a tragedy. Indianapolis was a rather difficult name to love. However, if this emperor was who I thought he was, his idea of a celebration involved slaughtering people and animals by the thousands. He really was not the sort of person you wanted organising your child's birthday party. The bleme mentioned something else, I said. The emperor wanted to sacrifice 2 special prisoners, me and the girl. Calypso clasped her hands like the jaws of the bear trap. Georgina. Exactly. Britomartis again sounded a bit too cheerful. The girl is safe enough for now, imprisoned and insane, yes, but alive. You concentrate on freeing my griffins. Go to the zoo at first light. The Emperor's guards will be ending their night shift then. They'll be tired and inattentive. I gazed at the landmine pieces in Leo's hands. Death by explosion was starting to sound like a kinder fate than Britomartis's quest. At least I won't be alone, I muttered. Actually, said the goddess, Leo Valdez must remain here. Leo flinched. Say what? You've proven yourself skilled with traps, the goddess explained. Emmy and Josephine need your help. The way station has defied discovery by the Emperor so far, but that won't last much longer. He can't tolerate any opposition. He will find this sanctuary. He means to destroy it. You, Leo Valdez, can help shore up the defences. But, cheer up, Britomartis faced Calypso. You can go with Apollo, my dear. 2 former immortals on a quest for me. Yes, I like that idea a lot. Calypso paled. But, no, I don't... She can't, I added. The sorceress nodded emphatically. We don't get along, so, it's settled then. The goddess rose from her chair. I'll meet you back here when you have my griffins. Don't fail me, mortals. She clapped her hands with glee. Oh, I've always wanted to say that. She twirled and disappeared in a flash like a fishing lure, leaving nothing behind but a few treble hooks snagged in the carpet. Chapter 10. Scrubbing toilets now. At least there's a great reward. Leftover tofu. After bear traps and pressure-activated explosives, I didn't think the afternoon could get any worse. Of course it did. Once we told Emmy and Josephine what had happened with Britomartis, our hosts sank into despair. They didn't seem reassured that the Griffin quest might lead to Georgina's rescue, or that their little girl would remain alive until the spectacular kill-fest the Emperor had planned in 3 days. Emmy and Joe were so resentful, not just of Britomartis but also of us, that they assigned us more chores. Oh sure, they claimed that all guests had to help out. The way station was a communal living space, not a hotel, blah blah blah. I knew better. There was no way scrubbing toilets in the way station's 26 known bathrooms was anything but a punishment. At least I didn't have to change the hay in the Griffin's lofts. By the time Leo was done with that, he looked like the victim of a mugging by a scarecrow. As for Calypso, she got to plant mung beans all afternoon with Emmy. I ask you, how is that fair? By dinner time I was starving. I hoped for another fresh meal, preferably one prepared for me, but Josephine waved listlessly towards the kitchen. I think there's some leftover tofu enchiladas in the fridge. Agamephis will show you to your rooms. She and Emmy left us to fend for ourselves. The glowing orange ghost escorted Calypso to her room first. Agamephis let it be known, via the magic 8-ball and lots of gesticulation, that girls and boys always slept in entirely different wings. I found this ridiculous, but like so many things about my sister and her hunters, it was beyond logic. Calypso didn't complain. Before leaving, she turned to us hesitantly and said, "See you in the morning," as if this was a huge concession, as if by talking to Leo and me at all, she was going above and beyond the courtesy we deserved. Honestly, I didn't see how anyone could act so haughty after an afternoon planting legumes. A few minutes later, armed with leftovers from the fridge, Leo and I followed Agamephis to our guest room. That's right, we had to share, which I took as another sign of our host's displeasure. Before leaving us, Agamephis tossed me his magic 8-ball. I frowned. "I didn't ask you a question." He pointed emphatically at the magic orb. I turned it over and read, "Apollo must bring her home." I wish the ghost had a face so I might interpret it. "You already told me that." I tossed the ball back to him, hoping for further explanation. Agamephis hovered expectantly, as if waiting for me to realise something. Then, shoulders slumped, he turned and floated away. I was in no mood for reheated tofu enchiladas. I gave mine to Leo, who sat cross-legged on his bed and inhaled his food, but still wore Georgina's overalls with a light frosting of hay. He seemed to have decided that being able to fit in a 7-year-old girl's work clothes was a mark of honour. I lay back on my bed. I stared at the arched brickwork on the ceiling, wondering if and when it would collapse on my head. I missed my bed at Camp Half-Blood. "The place ain't so bad," Leo said. "When I was between foster homes, I slept under the main street bridge in Houston for like a month." I glanced over. He did look quite comfortable in his nest of hay and blankets. "You will change clothes before turning in?" I asked. He shrugged. "I'll shower in the morning. If I get itchy in the middle of the night, I'll just burst into flames." "I'm not in the mood for joking, not after Britomartis." "Who's joking?" "Don't worry, I'm sure Joe has this place rigged with fire suppression equipment." The thought of waking up burning and covered in extinguisher foam did not appeal to me, but it would be about par for the course. Leo tapped his fork against his plate. "These tofu enchiladas are sabrosas. Gotta get the recipe from Josephine. My homegirl Piper would love them." "How can you be so calm?" I demanded. "I'm going on a dangerous quest tomorrow with your girlfriend." Normally, telling a mortal man that I was going somewhere with his girlfriend would have been enough to break his heart. Leo concentrated on his tofu. "You guys will do fine." "But Calypso has no powers. How will she help me?" "It ain't about powers, Essay. You watch. Calypso will stay safe. We'll stay safe your sorry butt tomorrow." I didn't like that idea. I didn't want my sorry butt dependent on a former sorceress who had failed at street fighting and improvisational comedy, especially given her recent mood. "And if she's still angry in the morning," I asked, "what's going on between you two?" Leo's fork hovered over his last enchilada. "It's just 6 months we were travelling, trying to get to New York. Constant danger, never staying in the same place longer than a night. Then another month and a half getting to Indianapolis. I considered that. I tried to imagine suffering through 4 times as many trials as I'd already experienced. I suppose that would put pressure on a new relationship." Leo nodded glumly. "Calypso lived on her island for thousands of years, man. She's all about gardening, weaving tapestries, making her surroundings beautiful. You can't do any of that when you don't have a home. Then there's the fact that I took her away." "You rescued her," I said. "The gods were in no hurry to free her from her prison. She might have been on that island for 1,000 more years." Leo chewed his last bite. He swallowed as if the tofu had turned to clay, which in my opinion would not have been a dramatic change. "Sometimes she's happy about it," he said. "Other times, without her powers, without her immortality, it's like—" He shook his head. I was going to compare our relationship to a machine. She would hate that. I don't mind machines. He set his plate on the nightstand. An engine is only built to handle so much stress, you know. Run it too fast for too long. It starts to overheat. This I understood. Even my sun chariot got a bit tetchy when I drove it all day in Maserati form. You need time for maintenance. You haven't had a chance to find out who you are as a couple without all the danger and constant movement. Leo smiled, though his eyes were devoid of their usual impish gleam. Yeah, except danger and constant movement, that's pretty much my life. I don't know how to fix that, if it's even fixable. He picked a few pieces of straw off his borrowed overalls. Enough of that. Better sleep while you can, Sonny. I'm going to crash. Don't call me Sonny, I complained, but it was too late. When Leo shuts down, he does so with the efficiency of a diesel generator. He flopped down sideways and immediately began to snore. I was not so lucky. I lay in bed for a long while, counting golden carnivorous sheep in my mind, until at last I drifted into uneasy sleep. Chapter 11. 4 beheaded dudes are too much for one nightmare. Why me? Sob, sob, sob. Naturally, I had terrible dreams. I found myself standing at the foot of a mighty fortress on a moonless night. Before me, rough-hewn walls soared hundreds of feet upward, flecks of feldspar glittering like stars. At first, I heard nothing but the whistling cries of owls and the woods behind me, a sound that always reminded me of night-time in ancient Greece. Then, at the base of the stronghold, stone ground against stone, a small hatch appeared where none had been before. A young man crawled out, lugging a heavy sack behind him. "Come on," he hissed to someone still in the tunnel. The man struggled to his feet, the contents of his sack clinking and clanking. Either he was taking out the recycling, unlikely, or he had just stolen a great deal of treasure. He turned in my direction, and a jolt of recognition made me want to scream like an owl. It was Trophonius, my son. You know that feeling when you suspect you might have fathered someone thousands of years ago, but you're not really sure? Then you see that child as a grown man, and looking into his eyes, you know beyond a doubt that he is yours. Yes, I'm sure many of you can relate. I didn't recall who his mother was. The wife of King Eriginus, perhaps? She had been quite a beauty. Trophonius's lustrous dark hair reminded me of hers, but his muscular physique and handsome face, that strong chin, that perfect nose, those rosy lips, yes, Trophonius clearly got his knockout good looks from me. His eyes gleamed with confidence as if to say, "That's right, I just crawled out of a tunnel, and I still look gorgeous." From the hatch, the head of another young man emerged. He must have had broader shoulders because he was having trouble squeezing through. Trophonius laughed under his breath. "Told you not to eat so much, brother." Despite his struggle, the other man looked up and grinned. He didn't resemble Trophonius at all. His hair was blonde and curly, his face as guileless, goofy, and ugly as a friendly donkey's. I realised this was Agamethus, Trophonius's half-brother. He was no son of mine. The poor boy had the misfortune of being the actual offspring of King Eriginus and his wife. "I can't believe it worked," said Agamethus, wriggling his left arm free. "Of course it worked," said Trophonius. "We're famous architects. We built the Temple of Delphi. Why wouldn't King Hyrieus trust us to build his treasury? Complete with a secret thieves' tunnel? Well, he'll never know about that," Trophonius said. "The paranoid old fool will assume his servants stole all his treasure. Now hurry up, wide load." Agamethus was too busy laughing to free himself. He stretched out his arm. "Help me." Trophonius rolled his eyes. He slung his sack of treasure to the ground, and thereby sprang the trap. I knew what would happen next. I remember the tale now that I saw it unfolding, but it was still hard to watch. King Hyrieus was paranoid, all right. Days before he had scoured the treasury for any possible weaknesses. Upon finding the tunnel, he said nothing to his servants, his building crew, or his architects. He didn't move his treasure. He simply laid a deadly trap and waited to find out exactly who planned to rob him. Trophonius set the bag of gold right on the tripwire, which only became active once a thief had exited the tunnel. The king intended to catch his betrayers red-handed. In the nearest tree, a mechanical bow fired a screaming flare skyward, cutting an arc of red flame across the dark. Inside the tunnel, a support beam snapped, crushing Agamethus' chest under a shower of stone. Agamethus gasped, his free arm flailing, his eyes bulged as he coughed blood. Trophonius cried in horror. He ran to his brother's side and tried to pull him free, but this only made Agamethus scream. "Leave me," said Agamethus. "I won't." Tears streaked Trophonius' face. "This is my fault. This was my idea. I'll get help. I'll tell the guards." "They'll only kill you too," Agamethus croaked. "Go while you can. And brother, the king knows my face," he gasped, his breath gurgling. "When he finds my body." "Don't talk that way. He'll know you were with me." Agamethus continued, his eyes now clear and calm with the certainty of death. He'll track you down. He'll declare war on our father. Make sure my body can't be identified. Agamethus clawed quickly and weakly at his knife hanging from his brother's belt. Trophonius wailed. He understood what his brother was asking. He heard the guards shouting in the distance. They would be here soon. He raised his voice to the heavens. Take me instead. Save him, father, please. Trophonius's father, Apollo, chose to ignore his prayer. I gave you fame, Apollo was thinking. I let you design my temple at Delphi. Then you used your reputation and talents to become a thief. You brought this upon yourself. In despair, Trophonius drew his knife. He kissed his brother's forehead one last time, then laid the blade across Agamethus's neck. My dream changed. I stood in a long subterranean chamber, like an alternate image of the way station's main hall. Overhead, a curved ceiling glittered with white subway tiles. Along either side of the room, where the rail pits would have been in a train depot, open canals of water flowed. Rows of television monitors lined the walls, flashing video clips of a bearded man with curly brown hair, perfect teeth and brilliant blue eyes. The videos reminded me of the Times Square ads for a late-night talk show host. The man mugged for the camera, laughing, kissing the screen, pretending to be off balance. In each shot he wore a different outfit, an Italian business suit, a race car driver's uniform, hunting fatigues, each cut from the skin of a lion. A title bounced around the screen in garish colours. The New Hercules. Yes, that's what he liked to call himself back in Roman times. He had that hero's shockingly good physique, but he wasn't the actual Hercules. I should know. I'd dealt with Hercules on many occasions. This emperor was more like someone's idea of Hercules, an airbrushed, overly muscular caricature. In the middle of the hall, flanked by the bodyguards and attendants, was the man himself, lounging on a white granite throne. Not many emperors can look imperial wearing only lion-skin swimming trunks, but Commodus managed. One of his legs was thrown casually over the throne's armrest. His golden abs formed such a six-pack I imagined I could see the ring pull tabs. With an immensely bored expression, using only 2 fingers, he twirled a 6-foot-long poleaxe that came very close to threatening his nearest advisor's anatomy. I wanted to whimper, not just because I still found Commodus attractive after so many centuries, not just because we had a complicated history, but also because he reminded me what I used to be like. Oh, to be able to look in the mirror and see perfection again, not a pudgy, awkward boy with a bad complexion. I forced myself to focus on the other people in the room. Kneeling before the emperor were 2 people I'd seen in my vision of Nero's penthouse, Marcus, the blinged-out jackal boy, and Vortigern, the barbarian. Marcus was trying to explain something to the emperor. He waved his hands desperately. We tried, sire. Listen. The emperor did not seem inclined to listen. His uninterested gaze drifted across the throne room to various amusements, a rack of torture tools, a row of arcade games, a set of weights and a freestanding target board plastered with, oh dear, the face of Lester Papadopoulos, bristling with embedded throwing knives. In the shadows at the back of the room, strange animals moved restlessly in cages. I saw no griffins, but there were other fabled beasts I hadn't seen in centuries. 6 winged Arabian serpents fluttered in an oversized canary cage. Inside a golden pen, a pair of bull-like creatures with huge horns snuffled at a feeding trough. European Yales, perhaps. Goodness, those had even been rare even back in ancient times. Marcus kept yammering excuses until, on the emperor's left, a portly man in a crimson business suit snapped, Enough! The advisor made a wide arc around the emperor's spinning poleaxe. His face was so red and sweaty that as a god of medicine, I wanted to warn him he was dangerously close to congestive heart failure. He advanced on the 2 supplicants. You are telling us, he snarled, that you lost her. 2 strong, capable servants of the triumvirate lost a little girl. How could that happen? Marcus cupped his hands. Lord Cleander, I don't know. We stopped at a convenience store outside of Dayton. She went to the restroom and she disappeared. Marcus glanced at his companion for support. Vortigern grunted. Cleander, the red-suited advisor, scowled. Was there any sort of plant near the restroom? Marcus blinked. Plant? Yes, you fool, the growing kind. There was a clump of dandelions growing from a crack in the tarmac by the door, but... What? Yelled Cleander. You let a daughter of Demeter near a plant? A daughter of Demeter? My heart felt like it had been launched upward in one of Britomartus's nets. At first I had wondered if these men were talking about Georgina, but they meant Meg McCaffrey. She had given her escorts the slip. Marcus gaped like a fish. Sir, it was just a weed. Which is all she needed to teleport away, screamed Cleander. You should have realized how powerful she is becoming. Gods only know where she is now. Actually, said the Emperor, sending a flash freeze through the room, I'm a god and I have no idea. He stopped twirling his poleaxe. He scanned the throne room until his gaze fixed on a Bleme servant, arranging cakes and canopies on a tea cart. She was not in disguise. Her chest face was in full view, though below her belly chin she wore a maid's black skirt and a white lace apron. The Emperor took aim. He actually chucked his poleaxe across the room, the blade burying itself between the maid's eyes. She staggered, managed to say, "Good shot, my lord," and then crumbled to dust. The advisers and bodyguards clapped politely. Commodus waved away their praise. "I'm bored with these two," he gestured at Marcus and Vortigern. "They failed, yes?" Cleander bowed. "Yes, my lord. Thanks to them, the daughter of Demeter is on the loose. If she reaches Indianapolis, she could cause us no end of trouble." The Emperor smiled. "Ah, but Cleander, you failed too, did you not?" The red-suited man gulped. "Sire, I assure you, it was your idea to allow Nero to send these idiots. You thought they'd be helpful in capturing Apollo. Now the girl has betrayed us, and Apollo is somewhere in my city, and you haven't apprehended him yet." "Sire, the meddlesome women of the way station—" "That's right," the Emperor said. "You haven't found them yet either. Don't get me started on all your failures concerning the naming ceremony." But sire, we will have thousands of animals for you to slaughter, hundreds of captives." "Boring. I told you, I want something creative. Are you my praetorian prefect or not, Cleander?" Yes, sire, and so you're responsible for any failures. But, and you're boring me," Commodus asked, "which is punishable by death." He glanced to either side of the throne. "Who's next in the chain of command? Speak up." A young man stepped forward, not a Germanus bodyguard, but definitely a fighter. His hand rested easily on the pommel of a sword. His face was a patchwork of scars. His clothes were casual, just jeans, a red and white t-shirt, the red Cornhuskers, and a red bandana tied across his curly dark hair. But he held himself with the easy confidence of a practiced killer. "I am next, sire." Commodus inclined his head. "Do it then." Cleander shrieked, "No!" The Cornhusker moved with blinding speed. His sword flashed. In 3 fluid slices, 3 people fell dead, their heads severed from their bodies. On the bright side, Cleander no longer had to worry about congestive heart failure. Neither did Marcus nor Vortigern. The Emperor clapped with delight. "Oh, nice! That was very entertaining, Lityrus." "Thank you, sire." The Cornhusker flicked the blood from his blade. "You are almost as skilled with the sword as I am," the Emperor said. "Have I ever told you how I decapitated a rhinoceros?" "Yes, my lord. Most impressive." Lityrus' voice was as bland as oatmeal. "Your permission to clear away these bodies?" "Of course," the Emperor said. "Now, you're Midas's boy, aren't you?" Lityrus's face seemed to develop a few new scars when he scowled. "Yes, sire." "But you can't do the golden touch thing?" "No, sire." "Pity. You do kill people well, though. That's good. Your first orders. Find Meg McCaffrey and Apollo. Bring them to me, alive if possible, and, there was something else." "The naming ceremony, sire?" "Yes," the Emperor grinned. Yes, I have some wonderful ideas to spice up the games. But since Apollo and the girl are running around loose, we should move forward and plan for the griffins. Go to the zoo right away. Bring the animals here for safekeeping. Manage all that for me and I won't kill you. Fair?" Lityrus's neck muscles tensed. "Of course, sire." As the new Praetorian prefect barked orders to the guards, telling them to drag away the decapitated bodies, someone spoke my name. "Apollo, wake up." My eyes fluttered open. Calypso stood over me. The room was dark. Nearby, Leo was still snoring away in his bed. "It's almost first light," said the sorceress. "We need to get going." I tried to blink away the remnants of my dreams. Agamethus's magic 8-ball seemed to float to the surface of my mind. Apollo must bring her home. I wondered if the ghost had meant Georgina or another girl whom I very much wanted to find. Calypso shook my shoulder. "Come on. You wake up very slowly for a sun god." What? Where?" "The zoo," she said. "Unless you want to wait around here for morning chores." Chapter 12. I sing of taters. Chili, sweet potato, blue. Why? Ask my arrow. Calypso knew how to motivate me. The thought of scrubbing toilets again was more terrifying than my dreams. We walked the dark streets in the cold early morning, keeping an eye out for polite mobs of killer bleme, but no one bothered us. Along the way I explained my nightmares to Calypso. I spelled out the name Commodus, in case saying it aloud might attract the god emperor's attention. Calypso had never heard of him. Of course, she'd been stuck on her island for the last few millennia. I doubted she would recognise the names of many people who hadn't washed up on her shores. She barely knew who Hercules was. Found that refreshing. Hercules was such an attention hog. You know this emperor personally? She asked. I convinced myself I wasn't blushing. The wind was just stinging my face. We met when he was younger. We had a surprising amount in common. Once he became emperor, I sighed. You know how it is. He got too much power and fame at a tender age. It messed with his head. Like Justin, Brittany, Lindsay, Amanda, Amadeus. I don't know any of those people. We need to spend more time on your pop culture lessons. No, please. Calypso struggled with the zipper of her coat. Today she was wearing an assortment of borrowed clothing she must have picked out in total darkness. A battered silver parka, probably from Emmy's Hunters of Artemis days, a blue Indy 500 t-shirt, an ankle-length brown skirt over black leggings, and bright purple and green workout shoes. Meg McCaffrey would have approved of her fashion sense. What about the sword-wielding cornhusker? Calypso asked. Tityrus, son of King Midas. I don't know much about him or why he is serving the emperor. We can only hope to get in and out of the zoo before he shows up. I don't relish the idea of meeting him in combat. Calypso flexed her fingers, perhaps remembering what happened the last time she punched someone. At least your friend Meg escaped her escorts, she noted. That's good news. Perhaps. I wanted to believe Meg was rebelling against Nero, that she had finally seen the truth about her monstrous stepfather and would now rush to my side, ready to aid me in my quests and stop giving me vexing orders. Unfortunately, I knew firsthand how hard it was to extricate oneself from an unhealthy relationship. Nero's hooks were buried deep in the girl's psyche. The idea of Meg on the run without a destination, terrified, pursued by the minions of two different emperors, that did not reassure me. I hoped she had at least had a friend, Peaches, the grain spirit, to rely on, but I had seen no sign of him in my visions. And Trophonius? Asked Calypso. Do you often forget when someone is your child? You wouldn't understand. We're looking for a dangerous oracle that drives people insane. The spirit of this oracle happens to be your son, who just might hold a grudge against you because you didn't answer his prayers, thus forcing him to cut off his own brother's head. Those facts would have been good to know. I've had a lot on my mind. It's a very small mortal mind. At least we agree on the size of your brain. Oh, stick a brick in it, I muttered. I was hoping for advice on how to proceed. You're useless. My advice is to stop being such a gluttus. The word meant buttocks, except that in ancient Greek it had a much ruder connotation. I tried to think of a withering reply, but the ancient Greek phrase for I know you are, but what am I, eluded me. Calypso ruffled the fletching in my quiver. If you want advice, why not ask your arrow? Perhaps he knows how to rescue griffins. I did not like Calypso's advice for seeking advice. I didn't see what a Shakespearean talking arrow could contribute to our present quest. Then again, I had nothing to lose except my temper. If the arrow annoyed me too much, I could always fire him into some monster's gluteus. I pulled out the arrow of Dodona. Immediately, his sonorous voice spoke in my mind, the shaft resonating with each word. Lo, it said, the mortal doth finally show sense. I've missed you too, I said. It's talking, Calypso asked. Unfortunately, yes. O arrow of Dodona, I have a question for you. Hittest me with thy best shot. I explained about my visions. I'm sure I looked ridiculous talking to an arrow as we strolled along West Maryland Street. Outside the Indiana Convention Center, I tripped and nearly impaled myself through the eye, but Calypso didn't even bother to laugh. During our travels together, she'd seen me humiliate myself in much more spectacular ways. Talking proved a slower way of bringing a projectile up to speed than by simply launching it from a bow, but at last I succeeded. Fie! The arrow shuddered in my hand. Thou hast given me not a question but a story. I wondered if it was testing me, gauging just how far it could push me before I snapped it in two. I might have done so long ago, except I feared I would then have two fragments of a talking arrow, which would give me bad advice in harmony. Very well, I said. How can we find the griffins? Where is Meg McCaffrey? How can we defeat the local emperor, free his prisoners, and take back control of the Oracle of Trophonius? Thou hast now asked too many questions, the arrow intoned. My wisdom doth not spew forth answers as if 'twere Google. Yes, the arrow was definitely tempting me to snap it. Let's start simply then, I said. How do we free the griffins? Goest thou to the zoo? We're already doing that. Findest thou the griffins' enclosure? Yes, but where? And don't tell me at the zoo. Where exactly in the Indianapolis Zoo are the griffins being kept? Seekest thou the choo-choo? The choo-choo? Is there an echo in here? Fine. We look for a train. Once we locate the griffins, how do we free them? Lo, thou shalt gain the beast's trust with tater-tots. Tater-tots? I waited for clarification or even just another snarky comment. The arrow remained silent. With a snort of disgust, I returned to my quiver. You know, Calypso said, hearing only one side of that conversation was very confusing. 'Twas not much better hearing both sides, I assured her. Something about a train and children made of potatoes. Tater tots are food, Leo. Her voice caught on his name. Leo likes them. My vast experience with women told me that Calypso was either feeling remorseful about her argument with Leo yesterday, or she got emotional on the subject of tater tots. I wasn't inclined to find out which. Whatever is the case, I knowest not. I spat the Shakespearean English off my tongue. I don't know what the arrow's advice means. Perhaps when we get to the zoo it will make sense. Because that happens so often when we arrive in a new place, Calypso said. Suddenly everything makes sense. You have a point, I sighed, but much like the point on my talking arrow, it does us no good. Shall we continue? We used the Washington Street Bridge to cross the White River, which was not at all white. It flowed wide, sluggish and brown between cement retaining walls, the water breaking around islands of scrubby bushes like acne patches, with which I was now all too familiar. It reminded me strangely of the Tiber in Rome, another underwhelming, long-neglected river. Yet, world-altering history had been made along the banks of the Tiber. I shuddered to think what plans Commodus had for this city, and if the White River fed the canals I glimpsed in his throne room, his lair might be close, which meant that his new prefect, Lityrus, might already be at the zoo. I decided to walk faster. The Indianapolis Zoo was tucked away in a park just off West Washington. We crossed an empty parking lot, heading towards the turquoise marquee of the main entrance. A banner out front read, Wildly Cute. For a moment, I thought perhaps the zoo staff had heard I was coming and decided to welcome me. Then I realised the banner was just an advertisement for koala bears, as if koalas needed advertising. Calypso frowned at the shuttered ticket booths. Nobody here. The place is locked up tight. That was the idea, I reminded her. The fewer mortals around, the better. But how do we get in? If only someone could control wind spirits and carry us over the fence. If only some god could teleport us, she countered, or snap his fingers and bring the griffins to us. I folded my arms. I'm beginning to remember why we exiled you on that island for 3,000 years. 3,568. It would have been longer if you'd had your way. I hadn't meant to start this argument again, but Calypso made it so easy. You were on a tropical island with pristine beaches, aerial servants, and a lavishly appointed cave, which made Aegea not a prison. I was tempted to blast her with godly power, except, well, I didn't have any. You don't miss your island, then? She blinked as if I'd thrown sand in her face. No, that's not the point. I was kept in exile. I had no one. Oh, please. You want to know what real exile feels like? This is my third time as a mortal, stripped of my powers, stripped of immortality. I can die, Calypso. Me too, she snapped. Yes, but you chose to go with Leo. You gave up your immortality for love. You're as bad as Hermithia. I hadn't realised how much anger was behind that last shot until I let it fly. My voice resounded across the parking lot. Somewhere in the zoo, a rudely awakened tropical bird squawked in protest. Calypso's expression hardened. Right. I only meant, save it. She gazed down the perimeter of the fence. Shall we find a place to climb over? I tried to formulate a gallant apology that would also completely vindicate my position, but I decided to let the matter drop. My shout might have woken up more than the toucans. We needed to hurry. We found a breaching point where the fence was slightly lower. Even in a skirt, Calypso proved the more agile climber. She made it over the top with no problem, while I snagged my shoe on barbed wire and found myself hanging upside down. It was complete luck that I did not fall into the tiger habitat. Shut up, I told Calypso when she pulled me free. I didn't say anything. The tiger glared at us from the other side of his enclosure, glass, as if to say, why are you bothering me if you haven't brought me breakfast? I'd always found tigers to be sensible creatures. Calypso and I crept through the zoo, keeping a lookout for mortals or imperial guards. Except for a zookeeper hosing down the lemur display, we saw no one. We stopped in an area that seemed to be the park's main crossroads. To our left stood a carousel. To our right, orangutans lounged in the trees of a large netted compound. Strategically placed around the plaza were several gift shops and cafes, all closed. Signs pointed towards various attractions: ocean, plains, jungle, flights of fancy. Flights of fancy, I said. Surely they would file griffins under fanciful flights. Calypso scanned our surroundings. She had unnerving eyes, dark brown and intensely focused, not unlike Artemis's gaze when she took aim at a target. I suppose on Aegea, Calypso had had many years of practice staring at the horizon, waiting for someone or something interesting to appear. Your arrow mentioned a train, she said. There's a sign for a train ride. Yes, but my arrow also said something about tater tots. I think it's getting a bit warped. Calypso pointed. There. At the nearest outdoor cafe, next to a shuttered serving window, a lunch menu was posted on the wall. I scanned the selection. 4 different kinds of tater tots. I felt overwhelmed by culinary confusion. Why would anyone need so many? Chili, sweet potato, blue? How can a tot be? I froze. For a nanosecond, I wasn't sure what had startled me. Then I realised my keen eyes had picked up on a sound in the distance. A man's voice. What is it? Calypso asked. Shh. I listened more intently. I hoped I might have been mistaken. Perhaps I'd simply heard some exotic bird with a gravelly croak, or the zookeeper cursing as he hosed out lemur poop. But no, even in my diminished mortal state, my hearing was exceptional. The voice spoke again, familiar and much closer. You 3, that way. You 2 with me. I touched Calypso's jacket sleeve. It's Literis, the Cornhusker. The sorceress muttered another Minoan curse, naming a part of Zeus's body that I did not want to think about. We need to hide. Unfortunately, Literis was approaching from the way we'd come. Judging from the sound of his voice, we had only seconds before he'd arrive. The crossroads offered any number of escape routes, but all of them would be within Literis' line of sight. Only one place was close enough to offer cover. When in doubt, Calypso said, Tater tots. She grabbed my hand and pulled me around the back of the cafe.